The moment Gordon Langford pulled that handgun from his waistband, his hand trembling, his face turning that violent shade of red people get when their ego starts panicking, I remember thinking, with a kind of cold clarity I didn't know I had, this idiot has absolutely no idea what he just did. And my wife, Serena Hale, didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't raise her voice. She just gave him that thin, almost amused smirk, the one that says she's already running scenarios while everyone else is still stuck on shock. I'm Ethan Cross, 35, software engineer, and 3 months earlier I'd been convinced we were moving into a normal suburban dream when I landed a job in Tampa. We chose Cedar Ridge Palms because it felt calm, clean, quiet streets, a community pool, and a short drive to MacDill Air Force Base where Serena was stationed. The realtor mentioned an active HOA, and I shrugged because I'd lived under HOAs before. Mow your lawn, put your trash bins away, don't paint your mailbox neon green. That kind of harmless control people tolerate for the illusion of order. Then, the day after we moved in, a shadow fell across my driveway while I was unloading boxes. I turned and met Langford, tall, wiry, late 60s, pressed khakis, polo shirt with Cedar Ridge Palms Homeowners Guild embroidered on the chest. And what grabbed my attention wasn't his smile. It was the unmistakable outline of a firearm on his hip, holstered in a way that felt more like a warning than a tool. He said my name like a command, shoved a binder at me thick enough to knock somebody out, told me to read the covenants thoroughly, and said they take regulations seriously. Then Serena stepped outside and I watched him change, his eyes flicking over her like he was searching for leverage, and he introduced himself again, a little louder this time, adding, "Former law enforcement," with that dry chuckle that wasn't warm at all. "So around here, I'm basically the neighborhood police." That night Serena told me, quietly, something about him felt wrong. His stance didn't match his story. The way he wore his gun was sloppy, like someone who had never drawn under pressure. Then she smirked and said, "He looks like a guy who wrote parking tickets and built a personality around it." And I laughed because it sounded ridiculous, and I still believed ridiculous meant harmless. 2 weeks later, the last thing we did to make the house feel like ours was the front door. The old one was faded brown, scratched and tired. Serena wanted it red, bright red, bold against the neutral exterior, and I wasn't about to argue home decor with a woman who can move through danger like it's math. So we sanded, primed, painted, and the door looked incredible, like a statement, like a tiny piece of joy. Then at 6 the next morning, the doorbell started ringing like someone was trying to break the sound barrier. I stumbled downstairs, opened the door, and Langford was on my porch in what looked like a homemade uniform. Tan tactical pants, a shirt with epaulets, the HOA logo stitched in place like a badge of office, and an actual metal badge pinned to his chest that read Guild Enforcement. His handgun now positioned to be seen, open carry, loud without words, and behind him stood Marlene Frost, the HOA secretary, clutching a notepad like she was terrified to be there. He announced we were in violation of Section 8, Paragraph 12, said exterior paint must conform to an approved earth tone palette, and called our new red door an abomination, then slapped a violation notice into my hand and demanded we repaint within 24 hours or face a $500 fine plus daily penalties. Serena came downstairs looking like she'd barely slept, still in uniform pants and a tan t-shirt, hair pulled tight, and Langford made the dumbest move possible by sneering that military cosplay didn't exempt us from rules. And Serena didn't react the way people expect. No anger, no shouting, just that dangerous stillness, the kind of calm that means she's fully awake now. She asked him, politely, to show the specific regulation that banned red doors. Langford smirked and tapped the binder like it was scripture. Serena flipped to the section, scanned it fast, looked up, and said the paragraph didn't prohibit red. It just said paint should maintain harmony and not cause undue visual disruption. She turned to the color palette he bragged about and pointed out it was listed as recommended, not required. And the introduction even stated these were guidelines unless explicitly labeled requirements. That's when Marlene, panicking, whispered that Serena was technically correct, and Langford's face went darker, and then he stepped forward and deliberately placed his hand on his holstered gun like he was ending the discussion with intimidation. "I don't care what technicalities you found," he growled. "In Cedar Ridge Palms, I'm the law, repaint it tomorrow, or there will be consequences." After he left, I tried to be the peacekeeper, told Serena it was just a door, we could repaint and move on, and she looked at me with a calm that felt heavier than anger. He just threatened us while touching a weapon, she said. That's not picky, Ethan. That's dangerous. And if we give in now, he'll do this forever. To us, to everyone who can't fight back. That afternoon, our neighbor Derek Vaughn stopped by and confirmed it. Langford did this to new residents to establish dominance. He'd made Derek's life hell over a shed, surprise inspections, bogus violations, lawyers, months of stress, and Derek handed me a video he'd recorded of Langford's hand on the gun during our confrontation. Keep that, Derek said, because this is going to escalate. He was right, and when Langford came again the next day, again resting his hand on his weapon while making demands, I watched Serena's eyes shift from annoyed homeowner to threat assessment, and I realized we weren't dealing with an HOA president. We were dealing with a man playing cop until he decided to become one with violence. After the second visit, Serena went into what I called her operational mode. She didn't rant. She didn't spiral. She gathered intelligence, phone calls, laptop sessions, notes in a small black notebook, and 3 days later, over dinner, she laid it out like a briefing. Gordon Langford was never a real cop the way he implied. He'd been part-time traffic enforcement in a small town, basically writing parking tickets, then moved to Florida and worked mall security until he got fired for excessive force against a teenager. Then he arrived in Cedar Ridge Palms, joined the HOA, and within 2 years maneuvered into the presidency through questionable elections where residents didn't receive ballots. And he'd stayed there ever since, unopposed, 5 cycles straight. Like a dictator who never allows a challenger to reach the stage. Even worse, he'd amended the HOA covenant at least 14 times, each time granting the president more enforcement power, including inspections without notice and emergency fines. But state records didn't show proper filing or voting as required by Florida law, and HOA fees were nearly double comparable communities, with a big reserve fund and spending so vague it looked designed to hide footprints. Then Serena got an email from Alyssa Kwan, an attorney who lived nearby. She'd been documenting Langford for 2 years and wanted to compare notes. When we met her, she had a file cabinet dedicated to him, a neighborhood map marked with targets, and a story that made my stomach twist. Judge Nolan Mercer, a retired judge, had once tried to organize a vote to remove Langford. And the night before the election, his tires were slashed and threats painted on his garage. Langford investigated and blamed vandals. Turnout collapsed, and Langford won again. Langford escalated against us like he was addicted to control. Violation notices for grass half an inch too tall, trash bin 3 inches off, hose improperly coiled, fines stapled to every page. And he delivered them personally, always with that hand drifting to his gun, as if he needed the threat to feel real. Serena installed discreet cameras and documented everything. Then one evening, she spotted a glint from the oak tree across the street, used binoculars, and confirmed Langford had mounted a surveillance camera aimed directly at our house. She photographed it, sent it to Alyssa, and Alyssa replied immediately that it was a clear violation of privacy laws and exactly what they needed. Serena stared at that camera and smiled, not happy, competitive. He wants surveillance games, she said. Fine, let's see who's better. A few days later, she implemented the next phase. She mowed our lawn diagonally, deliberately breaking one of Langford's ridiculous aesthetic rules, then waited, and right on schedule, Langford arrived with Marlene and a stocky guy trying to look scary, waving a notice, demanding a $1,000 fine and immediate remowing. Serena, calm and polite, asked whether that rule was legally enforceable under state statutes governing HOAs, and the word law seemed to ignite Langford's rage. He started yelling that he didn't need courts, that the agreement gave him authority, and right then, perfect timing arrived in the form of a government-issued black SUV pulling into our driveway. A uniformed officer stepped out, calm, controlled, unmistakably real, and Serena greeted him. Perfect timing, Captain Rafael Moreno, and introduced him to Langford, whose face flickered as he realized Serena's uniform wasn't cosplay, it was her actual life. Langford tried to recalibrate into fake respect, but then his hand drifted to his gun again, and I watched Captain Moreno's posture tighten subtly into alertness. Serena narrated the truth with perfect precision. Mr. Langford is reminding me of his authority by gesturing to his firearm. And that sentence hung in the air like a spotlight, forcing Langford to yank his hand away as Captain Moreno asked, calmly but sharply, if Langford was threatening a United States Army officer with a gun over lawn patterns. Langford stammered, stepped back, and retreated, humiliated, and as they drove off, Serena watched like she already knew the ending. "He'll be back," she said, "and next time he'll come prepared." The next day, we received 5 violations at once with thousands in fines and threats of liens. And then the unexpected happened. A middle-aged woman came to our door, nervous, whispering her name was Harper Langford, Gordon's wife, and she begged to come inside because she didn't want anyone to see her talking to us. She apologized, said Gordon hadn't always been like this. Losing his security job had shattered him. The HOA presidency gave him control again. But now he was paranoid, obsessed, and after the military encounter, he'd been up all night researching us and calling emergency meetings with his inner circle. Before she left, she pressed a USB drive into Serena's hand, saying it contained real financial records and recordings of planning sessions, and she was scared Gordon was going to do something extreme, and she begged us not to reveal the source. We plugged it in, and the story turned from HOA nightmare into criminal conspiracy. The financials showed years of skimming, fake maintenance companies billing the HOA for work never done, money routed into accounts Gordon controlled, and the recordings were worse. Gordon and his inner circle openly discussed making examples of homeowners, going beyond fines, and letting accidents happen to property, nothing traceable. And in one clip, they discussed tampering with a car's brakes. Gordon's voice cold as he framed it as a lesson. Serena didn't flinch, but I saw the decision settle in her eyes like steel. "This is no longer harassment," she said. "This is threat escalation." Within hours, we assembled our coalition: Alyssa Kwan, Derek Vaughn, Judge Nolan Mercer, several targeted homeowners, and Serena laid out the evidence and a plan: Operation Freedom Pines, expand surveillance coverage, prepare emergency motions, route complaints to trustworthy channels, and create a situation where Gordon's ego would force him to overstep in front of witnesses and cameras. I still tried to offer the coward's path: repaint the door, pay, lay low, but Serena looked at the map of victims and said this wasn't about us anymore. He was targeting retirees, single parents, people who couldn't afford lawyers or stress, and bullies only stop when someone stands up. The next day, we painted a massive American flag on our lawn using washable paint, a provocative but temporary patriotic display, and neighbors began gathering, drawn by curiosity and hope. Derek texted when Gordon was on the way. Cameras activated across multiple homes. Alyssa and Judge Mercer observed from a parked car. I recorded from the porch. And Serena stood at the center of the lawn flag in full uniform, calm as a monument. Gordon arrived like a storm, shouting, hand on gun, demanding it be removed. Serena cited the HOA's own allowance for patriotic displays and backed into a corner. Gordon snapped, drew his gun, and threatened to remove her from the neighborhood permanently. Serena locked eyes with him and spoke loud enough for every device to capture, identifying his behavior as an armed threat against a U.S. Army officer on private property, giving him one chance to holster and step back. That's when Captain Rafael Moreno arrived with 2 other soldiers, and his command voice cut through the street, ordering Gordon to drop the weapon. Gordon fumbled, tried to hide behind a carry permit, and Moreno shut it down with blunt reality. A permit doesn't authorize brandishing over lawn decorations. Police arrived, reviewed the multi-angle footage, and the tone changed instantly. This wasn't HOA drama. This was a crime. And Alyssa presented the broader pattern: harassment, illegal surveillance, financial irregularities, and recordings discussing property damage. Search warrants followed. Gordon posted bail fast through connections, and then retaliation began: slashed tires, canceled appointments, and an attempt to access Serena's personnel file using stolen credentials. And Harper returned, terrified, whispering that Gordon had friends inside local government and was talking to State Senator Clay Harmon, notorious for corruption, and they planned to discredit us before hearings. That's when Serena said the line that cracked the whole thing open. "This isn't about paint," she said. "Follow the money." Property records revealed Cedar Ridge Palm sat on land tied to major development and valuable rights. The HOA controlled collective negotiation power. Whoever controlled the HOA controlled the deal, and Senator Harman had influence over infrastructure funding, and suddenly Gordon's rules looked like tactics to pressure residents out, drive down value, consolidate control, and cash out. We started seeing surveillance vehicles, open mail, even an attempted forged ID incident near the base asking about Serena's unit. And Serena responded the way she always did, not with panic, with countermeasures. She called former colleagues, set up counter-surveillance, and I used my skills to map the network, transactions, shell companies, communications, patterns that tied HOA withdrawals to political moves. Then came the breakthrough, messages from a law enforcement contact, Detective Rowan Pike, explicit plans to find dirt on Serena, and a scheduled wellness check, meant to enter our home and plant evidence, drugs, anything that could destroy her career and collapse our case. Serena didn't wait for them to strike. She turned their move into our trap: hidden cameras, secure cloud uploads, legal documents prepared, trustworthy law enforcement contacts alerted. Serena and I staged a departure to be seen, then slipped back in through a neighbor's yard to a hidden observation point. At 11:17, Pike arrived with deputies, entered with a master key, announced welfare check, then searched like men with instructions, directing them to exact locations. And we watched Pike remove a small bag and instruct a deputy to plant it in a drawer, saying Senator Harman wanted it to stick, that Serena's career would be over and the case would fall apart. One deputy hesitated, and Pike dismissed any moral discomfort, saying the land deal mattered more, and Gordon delivered votes, so they delivered for Gordon. That footage became the end. After they left, Serena activated the response. Military police documented the planted evidence without contaminating prints. Alyssa filed emergency motions, and federal agents arrested Pike within hours. Deputies cooperated, and raids hit both Senator Harman's office and Gordon's home, revealing a multi-million-dollar land fraud network. HOA funds drained to finance political campaigns and bribes. Arbitrary rules used as coercion, substandard construction tied to connected companies, falsified. Reports hiding risks. The neighborhood itself had been built on lies. News trucks arrived. The story went from local to national. Emergency elections replaced the board. Judge Nolan Mercer became HOA president. Alyssa Kwan legal counsel. A full audit wiped out over 100 unenforceable rules, replaced with a simple 10-page guideline built around safety and mutual respect. Lawsuits forced repairs and created long-term funds, and Gordon's bravado collapsed as co-conspirators turned. Evidence stacked, and he faced dozens of charges, including the most damning, trying to frame a military officer with false evidence. He was convicted, sentenced to 18 years, assets seized to help restore the community, and where his surveillance had once watched families like prey. A community garden eventually grew, like a quiet joke the neighborhood finally got to tell. A year later, Serena and I stood on our porch, the red door still bright, still unapologetic, and watched kids play in yards without fear. And Serena said something that still hits me in the chest. In most operations, you disrupt a target and move on, she said. Here, we actually rebuilt something. And that's the closure. Not just that Gordon lost, not just that Harman fell, but that a neighborhood that had been living under fear learned what unity feels like again, learned what it means when rules stop being weapons. So here's my question to you, and I mean it. When someone uses order to justify threats, surveillance, and harm, and the only way to stop it is to expose everything and push until the whole machine collapses, is that justice? Is it revenge? Or is it the moment those two become the same thing, because a line was crossed first?